Welcome all to our financial wellness podcast, From Roots to Fruits, where we nurture our roots to grow more delicious fruits. I'm your host, Arlyne. Let's get started. Okay, welcome back, everyone. And it is the new year now. We've recorded this in December, but Happy New Year to everybody. I'm so excited for our next guest, someone who I see as a busy bee from my perspective, and someone who is on a mission to demystify finances. She is no jargon. She's out here educating people on finances, both in schools, in workplaces, and just to the general public. I absolutely love the posts that come out because I feel like, there's absolutely no jargon here. It's really simple for people to understand the financial education. So welcome, Funmi.
Thank you so much. Thank you. That's really lovely to hear because, that is my main mission. So, if it's working, I'm happy.
It definitely is. It definitely is. And I think also just your branding and your approach and your smiley face as well, it just makes it like, okay, finances are not that intimidating. Maybe let me listen to her because it's like a little bit of more of a friendlier approach. So it's definitely coming off really well.
Excellent. Great.
I just wanted to go straight into kind of like a little bit of an overview from yourself of your journey to educating people on personal finances, because I know you've got a bit of a different background when you worked in corporate. Do you mind sharing your journey to now?
Yeah, of course, I'd love to. So, I actually started off life as a lawyer, and I am still a qualified lawyer. So, I started my training contract back in 2003. So, a very long time ago. And I was a lawyer from 2003 up until 2020. I started off working in law firms, and my clients were finance companies. And then after a few years, I went to work in the legal teams of those finance companies. And I did that for well over a decade. So that's all types of companies. And effectively, I was just giving advice from all the way from we want to launch a new product, what do we need to do and not do, all the way through to selling it, how we communicate with customers, what the terms and conditions need to say. And then, for example, if it was like a credit product, what would happen if, for example, somebody wasn't able to pay? So, kind of that whole spectrum right from the beginning to the end of a customer journey. And that's what I used to do. And I did that, like I said, up until 2020. And then I kind of thought that there was maybe more that I could do. It was really obvious to me that I was really lucky because I had all of this knowledge because I'd worked and was working in finance, but most people aren't. And so I wanted to do something to kind of help more people understand their money and finances. So that's probably when the idea, the seed for Hoops Finance was sort of sown. I came across the concept of financial coaching and I thought, well, that sounds like something I'd like to do. So I trained to be a financial coach. And then a lot of the people that I was speaking to and working with, one area where they had a lot of questions about was buying a property. So I thought, well, I'll train and qualify as a mortgage advisor then. So I did that as well. And I did that up until last year. So I've sort of been focusing on hoops full time for about a year now. And after I sort of was doing that and having those conversations with people, what I was finding was that a lot of the conversation obviously was about getting the mortgage, but then it was also more broadly around their sort of just general personal finances. And it kind of really, really made really obvious that there was still so much that we don't know. We're not taught this stuff, at school. Well, most of us aren't taught this stuff at school. If you're lucky, then you'll have really good help and guidance from your family or your caregivers, but that's not always the case. So I just felt like there was something missing and that something needed to be done to try and close the gaps that we have in knowledge. And so I thought, well, I've got lots of knowledge in my head, and why don't I try and share that? And that's kind of when I decided to do Hoops Finance full time.
Yay! Congratulations on a whole year full
Thank
time
you.
with Hoops Finance. But I think, as you said, your journey has been preparing you to now, especially the fact that you have been working in the finance field, understand all the jargon, you understand, the different products that are out there, and then now you're giving it to the public. And even better, you are also a mortgage advisor, which is fantastic. It's really great because that's another area where people only focus on it either when they're ready to buy a house. Then it's like, okay, I need to look at my credit score. I need to think about saving up XYZ. However, we should probably have that education from the start and always know about what's going on with mortgages. Just have a finger to the pulse because a lot of people can get affected when they're now remortgaging and all of that. So I'm glad that you're weaving in all these different aspects and then educating people. And then one thing that so sorry. One thing that I was going to say was that I love when you are updating people on the current affairs. You let us know what's happening right now. Maybe you've read an article in the news and then you're also letting us know what are the key points. That's, I think, really, really valuable because a lot of people can read something, but then they miss the point. So I don't know what inspired you to do that. Is that something that you've done for yourself all along?
Well, I really like reading the financial news and keeping up to date with what's going on. And
Yeah.
because one of the things that I really wanted to do was, like we sort of said at the beginning, was to kind of demystify sort of the world of money and personal finance. Because I think a lot of people can think it's really, really complicated, or that things that are happening don't really impact them. And actually, a lot of what happens in the economy, most of what happens in the economy, will have some sort of impact on us as individuals and our family and our friends. And I think because people aren't generally reading the finance pages, they're maybe missing out on some of the stuff that's happening. Or if they're hearing about it, they're not necessarily able to see, okay, that's happened there, but this is how it impacts me here. So I have always tried to, whenever something big comes up in the news, I've always tried to kind of put it out there and then try and explain what's happened and what it means. But over the past couple of months, I've tried to be really consistent. So I try and do it every day. Well, every weekday, sorry. And then I also try, rather than just always just saying, this is what's happened, this is what's happened, I try and also ask questions to see what people know. So on Instagram, for example, I do quite a few polls. So I might post up a story and then say, what do people think about this? So for example, I think recently I did one on the fact that NS&I were reducing the prize pot, the prize fund. So I was like, does people know about sort of how premium bonds work? Today there was one on the amount of money that HMRC makes in interest when people submit their tax returns late and don't pay their tax bills on time. So it's just little bits of information like that I kind of say, this is what's happening, and try and understand what people know and also what they want to know. And then people off the back of that will often DM me, so, oh, I saw this, and then just ask me a random question, which I love because it means that
Yes.
it's useful and it's making them think. So yeah, that's why I'm gonna keep doing it. It's I must confess, I try and do it first thing in the morning. So I'm frantically trying to do it before my daughter wakes up. So I'm not always successful. Sometimes it might come out at lunchtime.
Yeah.
But while people are still saying that they're finding it useful, they're going to keep trying to do it.
Yes, yes, I echo that. Same. And it's really it's great to just kind of see it in an informal way as well, rather than sitting down and watching the news. It's like, okay, this is someone relatable. So yeah, you're doing a great job. Please keep doing it. And my next question was around Hoops Finance. What is really, I know the mission and the intention, but in terms of 2025 and going on, what are you hoping to relate to the public? What are you hoping to achieve with Hoops Finance?
So I guess my big mission or vision, I'm never sure which one it is to effectively help the nation understand their finances better so that they can make better decisions for themselves and their families. When I'm going to go on a little bit of a backtrack here, but when I was at primary school, I remember this organisation called CAFOD coming into school and saying, they've got this little saying that says, you give a man a fish and he can eat for a day, you teach a man to fish and he can eat for life. So what I want to do is try and, as much as I, love sort of sharing my knowledge with people, I want people to not have to rely on someone else and to get to the point where they are comfortable enough and confident enough to be able to read a newspaper article and be like, right, that impacts me in this way. And now that means I have either have to do this or stop doing this. So I want to give people enough information, enough confidence that they can go ahead and make these financial decisions for themselves. So that's the kind of the broad mission, to, I guess, help people understand their money better and then be confident about making financial decisions. And I just want to do more of that in 2025. You know, at the moment, I'm one person, it's just me,
Yeah.
trying to spread this mission. So it's trying to get out to as many people as I can. You know, we've got, what, 60 plus million people in the country.
Hmm.
There's lots and lots for us to do. There's lots of people doing great work in this area, and I just want to keep doing my bit, I guess.
Yes, yes. And it affects a lot of different people in a lot of different spaces. So also it's finding the right people. And I know you also go into schools. I don't know if that's inspired by your daughter. So it's like, okay, as a mom, I want her to know XYZ. But how has it been going into schools to educate people around, or young people around, managing their personal finances?
I love it because
Yeah.
children can be quite unpredictable and they are very direct, which I love. I'm quite a direct person. Sometimes people say maybe I'm a little bit too direct. I might need to pull it back a bit. But they ask questions and I love that. And I also think that times have changed. We are growing, children now are growing up in a very different environment to, say, the environment that I grew up in. So when I was growing up, there wasn't social media. There wasn't social media. And like my
Yeah.
daughter's growing up in a world, she's generation A, generation alpha, where social media is just ever present. You know,
Yes.
because I think I make a real effort, she sees physical money quite a lot. But I know there's loads of children that don't actually ever see physical money because we're paying with our card or with our phone or buying things online. So
Mhm.
I just think that it's a very different environment for them. I actually think it's actually harder for children now to actually really understand, without sort of making a real effort. I think it's harder for them to understand the world of
Mm.
money because they don't see it in the same way, in the sort of physical sense that we did. So I think we have to make a real effort to help them understand it. But they are also just, I guess, what one of the huge positives is that they are so inspirational and aspirational and they want to do all of these things. And I think one thing I think that we don't do very well is that when you're really young, we encourage you to be bold and be strong and speak your mind and all of these things. And I feel that as you then get a bit older, we kind of like try and quieten people quite a bit. And what I love is that these children are just still so enthusiastic and they'll tell you their business ideas and they'll tell you what things they want to buy and what they want to do. And they're so excited about it. And I think for us as adults, what we need to be doing is sort of harnessing that and then saying, okay, this is what you want to do. So this is what the sort of steps you'll need to think about to try and get there. And I think a lot of people think social media is not a good thing,
Yeah.
has the potential for, you know, for lots of things that are negative. And I do agree with that to a certain extent. But we have to be realistic. Our young people are on social media. So if they're on there, we need to give them the skills so that they can see something and not just believe everything that's in it. They can look at things and they can question it and they can analyze it and they can be critical and they can spot scams because they know AI exists and maybe to ask a few questions before giving somebody your details. All of that type of stuff I think is really important. So I think I love going into schools. I love having these money conversations with young people, but I also think it's kind of our duty as adults to make sure that we do what we can so that they are protected to a certain extent when they are engaging with things online.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think in terms of thinking of young people, as you said, they're so curious about quite a lot of things and really tech savvy, especially when I'm with my nieces and my nephews. They're teaching me stuff from my phone. And I think there's just something there where they just truly understand stuff. And as you said, giving them the right skills to be able to deal with this ever changing world and loads of media around. I think you touched on fraud, that aspect, but is there anything else that they're curious about that you've kind of clocked on when you're in the schools?
Funniest thing, I was not expecting this at all.
Yeah.
Tax. They they are really interested in the subject of tax. They get quite exercised about whether or not you should pay tax. Is it fair? So one of the things that I do in one of my sessions is I take them through a payslip. So I have a copy of the payslip and I literally walk them through what it
So
means.
good.
And when I get to the tax part and I explain that number one, it's not just one tax, it's two. And they're like, okay, because lots of them haven't heard of national insurance. And then I explain how it's calculated. It's actually quite funny because some of their minds are absolutely blown. They're like, so you earn more and then you pay more. And I'm like, yes and no, it depends. And then the conversation start because some people are fully on board with that and some really aren't. And what I find very interesting is a lot of them are coming to that discussion with a lot of negativity around tax. And that's coming from somewhere. I don't think, they've not woken up one day and thought tax is bad, I guess. They're hearing it. So they're hearing it probably from the adults around them. Maybe they're reading about it when they're reading things, in the press or social media, all of that type of stuff. So one of the things that I really try and do is not say tax is right or tax is wrong, but try and help them understand what tax goes on. And there's this little pie chart that I've got that I can create that says, okay, well, this is all the different things that tax is spent on. And often I'm in a school and I'm saying, who paid to come to school? And they're like, well, no, I didn't. I'm like, well, how are we paying the teachers? How are we, maintaining the building, the chair you're sitting on? Who paid for that? So I think sometimes there's a bit of a disconnect. So what I try and do is kind of say, well, okay, but this is what tax is going on, and now you know that. Do you feel any differently? Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But I think we need to give people the information so that they're not just making a decision based on something they've heard somebody say once or twice.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like that's even maybe step two. Step one, as you said, is even just letting them know that you're taxed and what exactly that means and how much. I personally remember that I was introduced to tax or understanding really what it means when I started my first job. And I had an instinct to just say, no, I shouldn't be taxed. I'm only 16. So we need to remove this. And I already had that negativity, as you said, like you're taking away money from me. But I love how you reframe it to say, actually, we need to understand what this money is going to be used on and educate. And I think adults now as well will have the same reaction as the kids that you've experienced in terms of I don't want to pay this tax. And then some are like, of course I should be paying this tax. So there's education that's needed all around.
Yeah, and it's really hard because look, I totally get it. I don't say every month or every year when I pay my tax, I love doing this. It's the best thing in the world. Like you do feel it, right? You do have this sense of that someone's taking my money almost. But I think then we have to think, okay, well, what is that being spent on? I think a lot of the problem at the moment is probably because people, if we look at public services, which is what obviously our tax goes to fund, we're not seeing them get better. We're not even necessarily seeing them stay the same. A lot of us are seeing them get worse. So because of that, we're like, well, what is it going on? Because I'm paying all this tax, but I can't see the benefit of it. I can't see what I'm paying for. So I think that's more of a problem. I think if our public services were at a place where everything was functioning well, you could easily get a GP appointment. You didn't have to wait months and months and months for a hospital appointment or an operation. I wonder if that was the case, would we feel differently about tax? I think we would. I think it's just
On
that at the moment we
average, most
can't see what
likely.
we're getting for what we're paying.
Yeah. Yeah, completely agree. So maybe a little bit more work has to be done on that. And I know you don't just only go into schools, you also provide workplace and community group financial education.
Mhm.
Just to ask a little bit more around the workplace element of it, what type of financial education are you providing in the workplace?
It's actually very similar. It's just a bit more detailed. So obviously I try and make everything age appropriate. So if I was in a school, I'd sort of maybe be doing high level sort of tax, for example. But when I'm in the workplace, it'll be a lot more detailed. So, and also in the workplace, people are bringing a lot more of their own personal experiences, their own stories. So, and they've lived more, right? They've got more things to say about maybe when a payslip was wrong, or when they had to deal with HMRC, or when they were opened a savings account. They've kind of got more life experience. So it's different in that respect. But actually, the topics are quite similar. The one where it probably is a lot more detailed would be mortgages, because people are just like right at that stage. One of the conversations that I had recently, actually, there was an event I went to at the Bank of England a couple of weeks ago, and one of the things they were saying was the financial education that we provide, whether it's to children or to adults, we need to think about it being just in time. So providing it at the right time. And going back to the point that you made earlier on, when someone's like, right, I want to buy a property, that's probably a bit too late, because they probably wanted to have been thinking about, saving and credit scores and credit reports and the mortgage process like years beforehand. So it's kind of, the topics are different, but they're often a lot more, sorry, the topics are similar, but they're often a lot more detailed. And people often have a lot more questions, that like real questions that relate to their life, as opposed to maybe in the schools, it's more sort of theoretical questions like, if I did this, what would happen type thing, because they're still young. But in the workplace, it's this has happened, or I want to do this.
Mm-hmm. Yes, but and I like that in terms of the comment that was made by the Bank of England, in terms of it needs to be right now, like appropriate for the person, which actually can be difficult to then strike that, because everyone has their own path and everyone's experiencing things at different times. And I think that might be part of the problem as well. So you only engage in maybe what's relevant to yourself. Therefore, you can come against issues and now you have to deal with them, rather than be a little bit more proactive and learn the broad spectrum of what's happening within finances. So I don't know if there's an answer to that, or if it's actually a question, but it just made me think in terms of, okay, well, how can we do that? I guess it's just continue to educate people, and then you'll find the right people that need your topics at that time.
Yeah, I think there's some topics that are broadly relevant to everybody. So, kind of understanding your income, knowing what's coming in and going out, so that you can budget and you don't end up having to use, um, use debt, saving for the future, trying to delay your gratification. Those are all things I think that are relevant, irrespective kind of, I guess, of your life stage. But there will be some things that will be more relevant to some people than others. So I talk a lot about family finances. So, for some people, for example, that's not going to be that relevant. Like really, really young people, not as relevant. But if you're at the age where you might be thinking about starting a family, then obviously more relevant. So I think it's having enough, covering the basics, but then also realize that there are sort of more specific areas or bespoke areas, and just making them available for at the time that people want and need them. So in workplaces, for example, often quite large organizations have what they call like ERG, so employee resource groups for different types of people. So there could be like a working parents network or a families network.
Yeah.
So maybe that network would be the right network to speak to about family finances. And then there might be like early careers talent, or in an organization. So they might be the people that you want to talk about. Okay, do you really understand about income and pay slips, and also the importance of pensions? Because it's very easy, for example, for somebody to think, oh, pension long term, I'm not going to really think about it. But if they understood, actually, if you start thinking about it when you're younger, that can set you up put you in a really, really good place. So maybe targeting things where there might be an issue or might be some misunderstanding. And what I always do as well with the companies I work with is they often will say, we want to do a workshop on X, or can you do a workshop on X, or what do you think like would be a good thing for people to learn about? And I say, well, I think this, but actually I'm not them. I think sometimes we guess, or we try and guess what people want to know about. So with the work that I do, I have a questionnaire that I get people to send out to the intended audience. Then based on what that comes back with, I then tailor the workshop to that. Because I think number one, if you're being asked, then it shows. I think that's a way to engage people, and I think from an employer perspective, that's really positive because your employees will see you as actually they want to do something for me because they thought to ask me. And then if you can deliver something that meets their needs and answer their questions, that generates a lot of goodwill as well. So you start with what people want to know about, and then you can build on that. So I always say, don't guess, just ask.
Yes. Yeah. And also, if they're asked, then you're providing the actual answers that they need. Much better approach to it. Quick break to talk about Roots to Fruits and all the amazing stuff we've got in store this year. So we have workshops, we've got coaching sessions, and we've got in-person events. So check out our website to find out which is the right solution for you. We're also on social media, so you can interact with us, comment, send a DM, whatever you'd like. I also like to tell you about our digital learning hub where we've got all the tools, we've got workbooks, we've got Excel documents on there, we've got videos to talk you through how to do certain tasks depending on the module that you would like to focus on, whether that is saving, paying off your debt, or if you'd like to just have a general pulse on how to budget. We have all of that for you on our learning hub. So follow the link and see you there. And you mentioned like workplaces are really proactive now, which is great because there's a study I believe that shows that the more you earn, it's not like you're now more financially literate, you still have the same problems. A lot of people are still living, day to day, paycheck to paycheck. And I wondered in terms of like the different type of companies or professions that you've come across, are there any that are like, oh yeah, you're actually more financially savvy than the other? I don't know if that's a little bit controversial to ask, actually.
I couldn't, in my experience, I wouldn't say that there's one industry that's more financially savvy than the other, but I would say that people that work in recruitment seem to be, in my experience, much happier to talk about money. And I wonder if that's because that's what they do. They're negotiating salaries for their candidates. So I do find that they're quite open and interestingly, very open with each other. So typically what I do, because I know that money is a sensitive topic, and I'm not suggesting that everybody shares all of their personal information with their colleagues. So I use tools quite a lot, things like Slido, because then you can answer questions or interact and engage on a poll, but it's all anonymous. So I always use that. But the recruitment companies that I've been to, that I've worked with, they're quite happy just to have the conversation with their peers. Not necessarily like, they're not like, I earned this or my bonus is this, but often actually a lot of the time in recruitment, it's quite open. Like the bonus structures seem to be quite transparent. So they're already, those barriers of talking about money and finance almost kind of already removed. And I don't see that so much in other industries because I think that salaries and bonuses and things like that are a lot less transparent. But that's just in my experience. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, when my sister was in customer service slash sales, they had a board where you could see how many deals someone has done. Therefore, you could work out the commission that they're going to get. And this was openly discussed. And they had like a top five or that sort of thing, which it can motivate you or demotivate you. But as you said, it then creates an atmosphere of talking about money, first of all, how much you earn, but then hopefully it breaks down that barrier for any other questions. Because as you said, if the first thing is so secretive, how much we earn, it's really hard to then say, I'm actually struggling, this month I've got quite a lot of debt. How do you open up that way if everything else is so secretive? So I really like as well that now a lot of companies don't put competitive as the salary. They're actually being a bit more transparent. Not that everyone does it, but a lot more are doing it now, which I think begins to break down that barrier.
Yeah. And I think that's really, really important for lots of reasons, for breaking for everybody, but also the research shows that there are certain groups in society that are actually more negatively impacted when there isn't either a salary or a salary range. And so because of that, it's like only positives. I personally think there's only positives when we know more about the world of money and personal finance, because we can do more. And when there is this secrecy, and I'm talking about this kind of more generally, like I said, I'm not saying that everybody should be telling everybody their numbers, how much they earn, etc. But I think that the more we know, the more information that we can have, the better choices that we can make, because you only know what you know. You know, how many of us think, oh God, if only I'd known this, I would have done something different. And that might not be the case in every situation, but a lot of the people that I speak to, you know, do say things like, I didn't realize, for example, that a credit card worked like that. I didn't realize that this is how they calculate affordability when they're looking at a mortgage. And if I had, then, you know, I might have done things differently. Now, we'll never know because we can't go back in time, but let's give people a chance to do things differently. And that's why I think this is so important.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. And my next question, in terms of all the work that you have been doing, I've seen a lot of media, appearances in the past year, which is really fantastic to see because you're reaching people on a wider scale. So I was just wondering, because also you are someone that reads the newspaper, which is fantastic. But what role does the media, not a lot of people do, what role does the media play for the wider audiences to just get a little bit more financially literate, not just providing the information, but more so that the person understands what they're reading?
Yeah, I think it's really, really important. So that's kind of like another strand of what I do, because, like I said before, like I'm just one person. So there's only so much I can do. But if I can get my voice, my message in places where there's lots of people can access it, that's another way of me getting the word out. So again, I'm very, I don't use lots of jargon. I try and use really simple language just to make sure that it's easy to understand. And then people, I think, are more likely to read it or to engage or to ask questions if they're like, oh, I get that. If I'm using lots of jargon or using terms that people don't understand, they're just going to switch off. So I try, I intentionally try and contact journalists if I think there's something that is of interest, or I've got a slightly different take on something that's come out. I will contact journalists and say, look, this is what I think about this.
Mm-hmm.
If you're writing an article on it, I'd love to comment, because that's just a different voice. I think, and this is the thing, I think different voices are really important as well. So I try and be quite neutral, and I try and think of things from different people's perspectives and kind of give different views, because we are all different. There's not necessarily a one size fits all for everyone. I think that's really important.
So true.
Sometimes I think, you see, you must do this, or, I often see a lot, credit is bad, like, and people talking about good credit and bad credit. Personally, I don't like that terminology, because what is good or bad for you is not necessarily good or bad for me. And also, I think it comes across as I'm judging you because you've done that, and I'm telling you that that's bad, but actually, I don't know your circumstances. So maybe what the good credit that I see, maybe the other person can't access that for whatever reason. So they've had to turn to something else that for them is the right option for them. So I also think that it's trying to help people understand that there are different options, and that we can make different choices. And even if we do, it doesn't mean that our choice is the wrong one. We need to almost kind of ignore what other people are doing and focus on what we're doing if it works for us.
So right, we are all on our individual paths. So yes, brilliant. And I wanted to just kind of ask you, in terms of this year, since it's the end of the year as we're recording, and for 2024, maybe beyond, because you started this journey, in 2020, what has been the best or the most interesting project that you've worked on?
I think the most unusual, and it was really, really lovely actually, I did a finance session in the park for a group of mums. So it was for a mums and baby group called It Takes a Village. And we were very lucky with the weather because the night before it was absolutely tipping it down. And I was like, we're meant to be doing this in the park. But the next day, honestly, like beautiful sunshine, like so hot that we were like, we might need to go under a tree and get shade. So it was complete, a few hours and very, very big difference. But there were lots of women, they came along with their babies and we sat in the park and we talked about money and family and finances and work and careers. And I loved it because it was so relaxed and it was just an opportunity, again, to meet people where they're at. Like sometimes you say that kind of in the where are you at kind of how much do you know sense. This was literally, I met them where they were at. They were at the park, they were with their children. And at the same time, they were able to ask questions about money and finance. So that was just a really, really lovely, lovely session. I've not done anything like that before.
Mm-hmm.
I'm normally like in the classroom or online or in a workspace. So yeah, it was great.
I love that. Just and the sun came out specifically for you guys, which is maybe it's hard to do all the time simply because of the weather in
Well,
this
exactly. Doesn't help
country.
if you live in the UK, right?
Yeah, but I love that also you were teaching it to mums because this is something that comes up a lot with my group of friends, and I've also done some work with for community groups that are catered to new moms or mums that have toddlers, and it's just a different there's a lot that you have to pivot when you're now in that new chapter. And I think it's something that we really need to touch on quite a lot because, as we know, equality is still not here in terms of equal pay. There's a pension gap and many other things that affect women. So I'm so glad that you said your favorite moment was actually supporting mums. But is there anything that you can share, maybe a piece of advice that you could give to a mom? They don't necessarily have to be a new mom.
Yeah, and actually, I mean that group was for mums. I actually think though that we need to do more for parents more generally.
Hmm.
I think that when you have your particularly your first child, it's so exciting. It's completely brand new to you, and obviously you get caught up in like the baby stuff and thinking about the baby, and maybe you don't think as much about, let's be honest, the more boring stuff like the admin stuff. What's going to happen money wise? What's going to and I think that we need to get better at having those conversations. We need to be thinking ahead of time, like what can we do? So if you are, let's say you're in a relationship and you're thinking that, this is long term, you're going to want to start a family, can you think a few years beforehand, okay, well, how might we want to raise our children? How might we want the childcare situation to look? Is one of us going to take a long period off work, and what's that going to mean financially? And just starting to have those conversations so that you're starting to think about actually what are you going to do? That's really helpful because that might then inform the types of jobs you go for. I think sometimes when people are looking at jobs and they're thinking about money in jobs, they focus solely on the salary. But looking at the wider benefits package for both parents is really, really important. So if you've got one job and their sort of parental policy is statutory, and then you've got another job and they're saying we'll give you 6 months paid, and if children are in your future and you're deciding between two jobs, the one that's giving you the 6 months paid, that probably makes more sense financially for when you have a child. So it's if you start to have these conversations sooner and earlier and you start to think about them, then actually that can help you with the choices that you're making leading up to that. I think trying to do things as a team is really, really important, and understanding
Very
the
true.
different roles that people play. I think in a heterosexual relationship where you've got your mum and you've got your dad, typically, based on what I see and all the data as well, typically it would be the mum that's taking the longest time off work. So the mum is the one that's taking effectively more of a hit to her career financially. So actually, what can the dad do to support that? Because you're a team, right? You're not working by going out to work, but you're raising a child. So you're both doing your bit. I think sometimes the care work that mothers do isn't valued in the right way or as much as it should be, and it's seen as dad goes out to work, mum stays at home. Well, actually, dad is only able to go out to work because mum is staying at home raising their child. So let's respect that role and let's value it accordingly, which I don't think we do at the moment. So if you're in that situation, or if that situation is, is going to be coming up for you shortly, what can you do to kind of compensate, I guess, for mum perhaps stepping out of her career for a little bit? So if you're not earning as much, for example, then you're not going to be paying as much into your pension or into savings. So actually, can we think about that household budget, that household income? Can we take some of that and can we put that into mum's pension, for example, whilst mum isn't working as much? What other things can we do? So I think it's just really important to have those conversations and realize that as mothers, it's not on you. You've made a decision as a couple to have a child, but it shouldn't be the case that you're the one that's impacted financially only. So that I would say have those types of discussions. It's really important.
Brilliant. And it all starts with a conversation as well. And I suppose if you are now used to discussing money as a unit, as you mentioned, as a partnership, that will hopefully filter through to your children that you're raising, because it's now become a family conversation. You're always discussing, how is this going to affect us in the future? And I just wanted to ask you if there's any tips, that maybe something that you're doing right now to educate children as the parents. Like, what's the first thing that, someone that's just listening now, like, I've never talked to my child about money, what can they do to start?
I think just sometimes explaining what you're doing. So
Mm-hmm.
where we used to live, my daughter's nursery was quite far away. So we used to get public transport there, and I would just tap my card, and then she would just tap my card when she could reach the tapper type thing. But I realised I never actually explained to her what I was doing. So I started explaining, we're paying to go on this, and the money, and it's obviously quite difficult to explain, like when you're tapping a card where the money's coming from. So I was trying to explain, the money is in a bank, something called a bank, and then they give you a card, and then every time you tap, that's you using the money in your bank account. So it's just small things like that. Like now children obviously just listen to when they're really young, they just take on a lot of the information, right? So they don't really question that much. I mean, there will come a time when they will question a lot, but when they're really young, they just take it on. So just things like that, starting to get her to understand. And then when you're paying for stuff, explaining that you're paying for it, why are you paying for it with a card this time, or maybe cash another time, maybe letting them have a bit of cash themselves. So a little while ago, we started to give my daughter pocket money. And we give her £2 a week, and she's allowed to use it on whatever she likes. We're not allowed to interfere, like within reason, obviously. Like if she wanted to only ever spend it all on chocolate, then we probably would be like, probably not. But actually, she hasn't tried to do that. And so we let her, every time she sees something out and we're out, we're like, okay, cool. Well, how much pocket money do you have? And if she's got enough, then she can buy it. But then we say to her, well, okay, but if you buy it, then all that money goes, and then we start again. So it got to one point actually where she had £16. So she'd saved for quite a while. And then she was able to buy, so we saw this like little like a toy car seat thing that she wanted. It was £18. And I was like, well, you've only got £16. And I said, and I think it was like a Thursday, because I'm not a mean mum, I was like, I'll give you an advance. So I gave her a £2 advance because she only gets it on a Saturday. And then effectively she bought the thing herself, and she was so delighted. And so I guess we were teaching her that you can save up for stuff and get it. And now it'll be do you want it now? Do you want this? Or do you want to save up for something else? And sometimes she'll say, I want it now. Often that's one of those balloons. When you're in the town centre and you see that person with all of those like cartoon balloons, she's like homing in on it. She loves those balloons.
They're so colourful.
Exactly,
and
right?
I want it now.
Children, come and spend your money. So often she'll spend it on one of those. But actually sometimes she wants the really big one, and they're like £6 or £8. So she has to save up a few weeks and then she can get it. So just small things like that. And it doesn't have to be £2. It could be 50p, it can be £1. But I think just giving them the ability to have a little bit of say over some money. So it's just, and I think it's also just choices. So maybe even if you go, actually I was about to say if you go shopping, And I hear this example used a lot, and I think no, because nobody wants to take their child on a big shop. So, like, let's say you're going to, like, you're in the local shop, and maybe there's a choice between two things. Can you have, can they make the choice? Can you say, well, here's £2. If you get this one, we spend it all. But if we get this one, then there's some money left over, and maybe you can keep it. Just small things like that. Just starting to have those conversations, so they understand that money is a thing, and we can make choices as to how we has to.
Great lessons, especially now there's the rise of buy now, pay later, which actually younger people utilize a lot more than the older generations. So just teaching her that delayed gratification, like actually if you just waited 1 week, then you could probably then buy it then rather than buy now and then pay later. So there's a lot there that you're teaching her to then handle when now she is out here and being bombarded by all these options to just spend your money right now.
Yeah. And also the thing is, look, I'm not perfect, right? We're all sort of figuring this out. But I realized recently, she was like, we were going somewhere, and she was like, should we just get an Uber? It was actually hilarious. And I then realized, clearly, I get lots of Ubers. Like, she's picked up on this, that I get lots of Ubers. So I was like, right, I probably need to think about, why am I getting so many Ubers? And then also one time she said, oh, should we, this is my funniest one. I actually did a post on LinkedIn about this. She said, should we get an Uber to the park? Now, the park is not far away. And I said, sure, where's your pocket money? And she's like, what do you mean? I was like, well, I'm happy to walk, but if you want to get an Uber, we're going to need to pay for it with your pocket money. And she said to me, but I want to use your money. And I was like, but that's my money to spend to make my choices with. And so we can do it, but we'll have to use your money. She's like, actually, no, let's walk. She made her choice, right? That's a perfect exercise in needs and wants. She didn't need to get an Uber, but she wanted to. She didn't want it enough, and then we walked. I mean, the park is like 5 minutes away. It was a ridiculous suggestion. But it was also very,
but you handled it quite well. You gave her a life lesson right there.
It was so funny. I couldn't believe it when she said, "Should we get an Uber to the park?"
Thank you so much. This has been such a great conversation. I just wanted to, lastly, where can people find you? And is there anything that you want to promote for next year that people, maybe an event or a workshop? How can people find the information for it?
Well, thank you, first of all, for having me on. This has been a great conversation. I love talking about this stuff. Where can people find me? So I'm on Instagram, and my handle is @hoops_finance. And then I'm also on LinkedIn. It's just my name, Funmi Olufunwa. And so, if you put that in, I think there's only one of me, and you'll find me. I'll pop up. And then in terms of things that I'm, events, I've got a first-time buyers event, like a webinar that I'm putting on. I know that things are quite tough for a lot of people, and first-time buyers constantly feeling like the goalposts are being moved. So I want to try and give as much support and guidance as I can. That's going to be a free workshop that I'm putting on, so we can put the information in the show notes so people can come and find out more about that. And then it's more of what I've been doing, so more work in schools, more work in workplaces, and just sharing more knowledge. So I would love people to follow me, ask me questions, always happy to answer. And let's keep talking, and let's keep doing what we can to improve our financial confidence so that we can make great financial decisions for us and our family.
Love it. Thank you so much. Okay, I think that will be it's a wrap. That is all for us today, guys. Join us next week for some more seeds to sow. And please remember to support us by following and leave a rating on our show on whichever platform you're listening to us from. To those watching on YouTube, please leave a like and a subscribe to our channel. All of your support goes a long way. Thank you so much for joining us today. And remember, keep shining.